Welcome back. You're listening to the panel discussion, The Intersection of CDM and Mobile Security and Government, sponsored by Mobile Iron on Federal News Radio, part of the Federal News Network. I'm your host, Jason Miller. My guests today are Adam Zimet, the Branch Chief for Identity, Credential, and Access Management at the Agriculture Department, Micah Sagan, the Associate Deputy CIO for Cybersecurity at the Energy Department, Andrew Lefelt, a CDM Chief Strategist for Mobile Iron, and Steve Brewer, the Lead Mobile System Architect for Booz Allen Hamilton's CDM program. We went through the kind of the security challenges that mobile brings, the threat vectors, the cloud challenge, and what mobility and CDM can kind of bring to agencies is this new really found data and this data analytics piece. And I think that's one of the big hopes. So let me start with Micah. You guys have put together a security operations center, a really advanced analytics center in many ways. When you guys look at CDM and the potential and the current state and the future state, what do you hope for, or what are you expecting that CDM will give you along those ideas of both data and analytics?
So CDM, as well as the sensors that we have around the department, bring huge amounts of data. In fact, so much that we're not really used to, and I could hire 1,000 analysts. They can't analyze that much data. So we need some kind of platform that's going to be able to automatically take a look at the incoming data, historical data every time we have new threats, go back and run the analytics across it, and be able to tell us almost preemptively, hey, here's what we're seeing, here's what we expect to see, and that frees up our analyst time, so they're not just looking at raw ones and zeros, right? They can then take that the analysis and now make that analysis actionable and go out and try to mitigate what we're seeing, the threats that we're seeing. In fact, we're seeing so much data come in from CDM and our sensors that we have had to go to what we call a big data platform. The traditional cyber analytics for the data sets, they're small, just are not, they cannot expand to the large data sets that we're seeing through CDM. And so we've implemented big data analytics in a cloud solution to be able to ingest that, and hopefully at some point we can automate the responses that our analysis platform is seeing, and again free up our analysts to do more mitigation and actionable targets.
It's interesting that the amount of data, CDM promised all this data, and boy did it deliver, right?
It did.
And so are you able to keep ahead of the data, or is it still, you still feel a little reactive versus proactive when it comes to understanding what the potential threats and vulnerabilities are?
So we were definitely taking this step by step because we know that we could get data overload very fast. And so we're running use cases now, building them very specific to our data sets and ingesting that into our big data platform based upon our use cases so that we can streamline our analytics to exactly what we need. We're also looking at integrating AI into this for the threats that we don't know about yet.
Steve, jump in as well, because when you guys are working with your customers, Booz Allen's multiple defend customers, they could be potentially having a very similar problem, and then when you add the mobile piece to it, now it's even more data coming in. What are you guys seeing from your clients?
Yeah, it's definitely a challenge ingesting all the data. I think the biggest value, though, is when you start to correlate the data. So that's what we've worked with some clients on, is how to correlate that data. An example on the mobile side is when you start to correlate, for instance, location data with access data. So if a device is accessing from China, it shows it's accessing from China, but it's, maybe that's not something you want to have happen, or it looks like it's the device is reporting that it's in the United States, but it's got a Chinese IP address or something like that. Those are some of the power of the analytics that we're going to be able to bring to the table once as the data is collected. When you look at, for instance, maybe a VPN access, a mobile device VPNing into an infrastructure, if you start to see duplicate authentication requests coming from two different IP addresses, you can correlate that data much more easily than legacy security operations centers have been able to correlate using big data analytics and some of the what was already talked about. But that's really the key, is that big data analytics, developing those. We're correlating the data, and that's the big challenge that we're working with customers on.
And it's also part of this identity management thing. If Adam always logs in from Bethesda, Maryland, and then all of a sudden Adam is logging in from Moscow, Russia, that may be a uh-oh moment for a big red flag that maybe someone at your security operations center could then look at and be like, okay, is Adam on travel? Call Adam's boss and see. Not that you would ever do that, Adam. But.
And ideally being able to move that to a real-time mitigation step with that data is key and key to being able to control those and make those access decisions on the fly.
And Andrew, that's where the automation side comes in as well. When we talk about automation, then we also get remediation, but also mitigation. So maybe bring that into the discussion, because I think once you have the data, you have the analytics, then you can really do some incredible things.
Sure. As part of being able to pull in all those data points, you want to correlate it, like Steve said, and be able to take actionable items. So what's really unique about our innovative way of supporting CDM is we're actually now able to create automated actions based on threats and mitigate against them before they happen. So CDM is, the early phases of it were all about understanding what's on the network, who's on the network, and what's happening on the network. But the later phases are about how do you mitigate what you see and what your analytics have picked up, and then more importantly, can you really remediate those findings in an operational setting such that the work productivity doesn't get impacted, right? And I think the industry tool sets are in their fundamental, baseline capability sets right now, or they're evolving, if I may. That's probably a better term, to the point where I believe they will fully mirror the core capabilities of CDM for the desktop that we've been supporting for the past 10 years out of Homeland Security. Right? I think the targeted state is to effectively provide situational awareness, optics, and mitigation and remediation of any risk, vulnerabilities, or threats that your workforce may came up against on their daily, day by day work environment.
Do you get a sense that this is starting to happen? I mean, client-wise, customer-wise, anything?
I think they see it. I think a lot of the agencies see the targeted state or what they would like to be able to integrate or be able to evolve into the enterprise to support these areas and these gaps in cybersecurity and threats. Mm-hmm. I think industry is trying to catch up with those capabilities and functionalities, and so I think it's really just a matter of time.
Yeah. Micah, jump in the automation side. You guys, you kind of mentioned this a little bit, but the AI is going to play a big role to help automate some of these analytics, but also, hey, close that port now because we're seeing this bad thing. You can almost automate it. Is that the future as well? Absolutely,
that's our hope. And being in energy is so distributed, as well as other departments are so distributed. If we have a tool that is be able to say, oh, this lab over here is seeing the same thing that we're seeing over here at another lab or another site. Okay, now we know that there is a distributed, targeted attack, and we can automatically close those ports, automatically restrict those IP addresses, and start doing tracebacks and start forming the intelligence that we need to be able to send up the flag to say, hey, we actually have a distributed attack. We do it all in an automated fashion. But again, it doesn't matter how many analysts I hire, I don't have enough to do that at the speed of light that we need to do.
What's great is if it's implemented correctly, this not only helps to improve security, but can also help improve the user and the client experience as well, which is really essential and really almost just expected when it comes to mobile and mobile experiences. If we can do these things automatically, we can not just make a risk determination as we've done historically on where's the data and what's the risk level of the data that's being accessed, but also factor in who's accessing it and when and where. And if someone is in a low risk situation, maybe we don't need to prompt them for quite as rigorous of a authentication steps and credentials and hoops that they've got to jump through. But if someone's in a high risk situation, then we can step that up a little bit. So it really goes to not just improving the security, it helps that experience as well. They don't have to be mutually exclusive.
Micah, did you want to jump in?
And I think this is where AI or machine learning can help us, because these are kind of squishy ideas, right? This is not something that is easy to write a long, analytics string for to say if then else, right? That's really hard to do in those kinds of environments where, hey, if the risk is a little low, now we can ease up a little bit. And our hope is that machine intelligence AI can help us to get to that point where we can kind of have that squishy kind of decision making.
Adam brings up a very interesting point about the customer experience and the client. We've talked a lot internally, right? We've talked a lot about, kind of securing federal networks, federal systems. But as USDA is a prime example, you're doing a lot within USDA to reach out to your customers, the farmers, the producers, the ranchers, and they are now hitting your systems because you're trying to make it self-service for them in many ways. And that is a whole different side of authentication that CDM can play a role in as well. Maybe, Adam, jump in here a little bit and talk about how you guys have to turn the page a little bit and look, okay, how do we look at it from the other side perspective too? Because if it's hard for the rancher or the farmer to log in, they're not going to have a good experience either. And that could, again, create some shadow IT in some ways.
Right, and it's as we've seen that even that community and the citizen community is increasingly using mobile devices themselves to access government resources. I mean, there's metrics that I think over half of all traffic to government websites is actually done from mobile. So when we're making these services available online to citizens, mobile and designing for mobile is a key aspect of that. The security comes in just the same though. They're accessing personal information. It's things that are still sensitive to that individual. And we're not going to be controlling the devices, the way we would with a corporate-owned or a government-owned device. So how we factor in that analytics, how we handle authentication, and do it in a secure way is really important.
Andrew, are you starting to get some requests from your customers around, for instance, that citizen-facing side, or is most things still they're focused on from a mobile perspective? Are they more focused on the internal
I think
government
both,
employee?
depending on the agency and their mission. These technologies are absolutely helping enable them to provide services in different ways, especially self-service portals or different applications that the citizenship might leverage to access their own personal information, Social Security information, things like that.
But in a sense, is the security side, is that discussion happening on the security side too, or is it how do we make it easier for Joe citizen or Mary citizen to get the access to the services they need? Oh yeah, got to do that security thing too. Versus, all right, if Micah is talking to his boss about creating a new internal HR app, just as an example, security is probably front and center, just like it would be with most things. I mean, do you guys get a sense? Anybody?
And that's where that AI, I think, and analytics and kind of real-time decision making to make that process as seamless as it possibly can be is going to be really important for those citizen-facing use cases.
We're just about out of time. So the last piece, I think, of our discussion, I think, is very important, is the workforce themselves. We started to talk maybe a little bit with the citizen side, but the federal workforce, the biggest threat is always the employee themselves, clicking on a link, making a bad decision. And I think one thing that CDM will do is in the long run, will kind of help create that better, I'll use the word barrier, and that's maybe not the best word, at least give some better hope to be able to stop us from being silly or stupid, right? So let me start at the end with Stephen there. Stephen, the workforce piece of this, how does that fit into the CDM mobile discussion? When you guys are having discussions with your clients, where does the workforce piece what kind of discussions are you seeing or having?
So I think there's a general understanding that no matter how much security you layer in, you're never going to fully defend against the insider threat attack. You can't, but you can mitigate the impact of that threat with the tools that you implement. So the analytics that we discussed earlier, implementing sound application development practices on mobile devices, implementing mobile threat detection on mobile devices, so that when a device, when a person with a mobile device wants to connect to an untrusted Wi-Fi network, at least that's detected and identified, and you can identify that man-in-the-middle attack and cut off access to resources. Seeing also some development of mobile applications that do that themselves. We've seen that in the baking industry some, where they're developing applications that limit your access to certain potentially. Limiting your access to some of your personal data based on where you are and where you connect. So I think implementing that technology and those practices in the workforce are going to help mitigate that insider threat.
And Adam, from your perspective, you have a lot of people to train.
Right, and I think that the evolution of security awareness training needs to catch up with the pace of change in mobile and cloud as well. We could spend a little bit less time on secure faxing procedures, for example, and talk more about
secure faxing.
the impact of using mobile devices as an end user, and that kind of gray line oftentimes between government-owned devices and data and personally owned devices and data, and just the impact that has on the enterprise from a security level. Personnel in sensitive, restricted areas with GPS fitness trackers on. It's a very harmless sort of mistake there, but being more aware of what mobile devices, as Micah mentioned, they're smarter than the satellites sometimes. There's a lot of sensors and a lot of data and a lot of things that they're generating, and making sure that people are aware of that and what that means so that they can use it responsibly.
You wait to the last 30 seconds to bring up the IoT issue, didn't you? Andrew?
Yeah, no, I think from the modern mobile workforce, the challenges are very dynamic and change on a daily basis. I think the effectiveness of a CDM solution as well as a mobile threat defense umbrella goes to the heart of being able to provide that comfort level and the security that the end user and the workforce requires to be able to be productive and address their mission, whether it's out in the field or whether you're telecommuting or whether you're in the office.
Mike, you got 10 seconds. You get the last word. What's the workforce side of it?
So we can't train ourselves out of an insider threat, right? But we can use things like sensors and CDM and analysis and AI to help protect our workforce from themselves.
Excellent. Gentlemen, this has been a fascinating conversation. Unfortunately, we are out of time for today. So let me first thank my guests. Adam Zimet, the Branch Chief for Identity, Credential, and Access Management at the Agriculture Department. Micah Sagan, the Associate Deputy CIO for Cybersecurity at the Energy Department. Andrew Lefelt, the CDM Chief Strategist for Mobile Iron. And Stephen Boer, the lead mobile systems architect for Booz Allen Hamilton's CDM program. You've been listening to the panel discussion, The Intersection of CDM and Mobile Security and Government, sponsored by Mobile Iron on Federal News Radio, part of the Federal News Network. I've been your host, Jason Miller. For more on this discussion, visit federalnewsnetwork.com and search Mobile Iron.
On behalf of Mobile Iron, thank you for joining us. A link to the archive session will be sent to you shortly. If you requested a training certificate, you will also receive an email with download instructions after the webinar. This concludes our discussion. Thank you.